Zdravo, marahaba, annyeonghaseyo. What up, home skillet? Hey, it's Tom from Green Shorts, and today I'm going to cut a limb off this oak tree and inoculate it with shiitake mushroom spore. I was recently introduced to a term that made a lot of sense to me, and it's in situ resource utilization. It's actually a term that comes from space travel, and it means harvesting or utilizing resources where you are. So in other words, using solar energy in space to power a spacecraft, or using raw materials found on a planet to build structures. I like to think of it as sustainability in space. And since COVID-19 has us all living on our own planets right now, it's made me think even more about what resources I can use in my own yard. For example, a limb off this oak tree. Wood is a great substrate for growing mushrooms. Case in point, any fallen tree that you've seen in the woods, including this log right behind me. But if we want to control what mushrooms those logs grow, then we need to cut it fresh and then inoculate it. I did purchase mushroom plug spore online from Fungi Perfecti, and it's on its way, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut this limb today because it needs 2 weeks to season. The natural antimicrobial properties of a live tree need to dissipate, and it's gonna take a little time to do that. One thing I'm not gonna do is take a chainsaw up a ladder. So I'm gonna cut this limb down with my bow saw. Just wanted to point out that I'm wearing my proud parent Parkview Track and Field t-shirt today in honor of my daughter's track team, whose season just got canceled. Go Parkview. It felt like I needed to be one rung higher. It's also when I decided this one was just gonna be too dangerous. I think this one ought to be a little more safe. Armed with my face shield and my trusty PV, a gift from my friend Helen Tapp. Thanks, Helen. I started with a clean cut on the split end of the branch. That's about the size log at this diameter that I can easily move around, which is what's important because you're going to be moving it from the stack, your rick, into a trash can or something where you're going to be soaking it. So you'll want it to be not too long that it won't submerge in your trash can, and not so long that you can't carry it. Any rotten spots where branches had died, I'm gonna trim it off with a clean cut. Now that they're cut, I'm gonna stack them off the ground. Whew. That chainsaw blade is dull. So this type of stack is called a rick, and this is a temporary location. I'm gonna leave it here for a couple weeks, let the natural antimicrobials in the oak season out, and then it'll be ready for inoculation. It's important that the logs are not sitting on the soil, because otherwise they would start to be colonized by whatever mycelium is living in the soil. Of course, you're only gonna be here for a couple weeks, but still I wanna keep that moisture from the ground away from these logs. It is okay if they get rained on though. All right, so now we wait. Well, I wait. You don't have to wait. While the logs were sitting, they had to pass muster with the local inspector. All right, so it's actually been 3 weeks since I cut this limb, and that's okay. You wanna do at least 2 weeks and no more than 6 months. At that point, the logs are probably starting to be colonized by something else. You can see how much these have darkened in that time, and they're actually starting to get a little bit of mold growth on the end. I'm not concerned about that, but it's time to get these things plugged. My box from Fungi Perfecti, or Fungi Perfecti, don't know how to pronounce it, comes with a guide on how to do my inoculation. I got some sealing wax to cover the dowels and the ends of the logs. And then here are the mycelium inoculated dowels that get pounded into the logs. Fungi Perfecti is the brainchild of Paul Stamets, who is one of the authorities on mushrooms. He's got a TED Talk on medicinal mushrooms that I'll link in the description below. There's a lot more to it than just shiitakes. And actually, I chose shiitakes because they're the easiest to grow. I did email them and asked them if they could offer you a discount coupon, and I hadn't heard back yet. I'm not sure if they do that or not. If that does arrive, I'll add it to the description when it comes. But coupon or not, I highly recommend them if you're looking to get into growing your own mushrooms. Here are my tools for the job. I got the trusty Workmate out with a gap set in the middle here, a rubber mallet, one of my shop towels here to help protect the bark on the logs as I'm drilling the holes in them. I've got a drill with a 5/16 drill bit and a ruler here to measure off and flag the depth I need to use. My depth is going to be 1.25 inches. I'll just flag that right here. So I'm doing my holes in a lattice pattern, no more than 4 inches apart. So I've got a row drilled in here. I'm going to rotate this log a little bit and then do another row kind of offset from the first. But this log is as small as I'm going to go on inoculation, just because I want enough mass in the log to generate mushrooms. So this just doesn't have as much as a thicker log would, so I'm probably only going to do 2 rows in this one just because of its size. You notice that the bark is damaged here, and that's actually something I want to repair. So I'm going to take off the areas of bark that are loose, and then I'm going to fill this with wax here when I cover the end of the logs. An opening like this is going to allow potentially some other fungi spore in, so want to protect that area and seal it off. So once the logs are drilled, then I'm going to dowel them. So I've grabbed a handful of spore. You can see how they're kind of stuck together. So okay, when you get a little bit like this, I like pulling that off and putting it down into a hole rather than wasting it. So I'll gently separate them in a pile and then use my rubber mallet to hammer them in. This is actually very gratifying. It's also a great thing to include your children in, if you've got them. Or have a log doweling party. And now the backside. Of course, I'm going to use a rocket stove to melt the wax. This is not normal candle wax. It's a food grade wax. Probably soy. A rocket booster. I don't want this burning super hot. So once I get this going with some smaller sticks, I'm going to use some bigger ones, which will make it burn more slowly. Rocket boosters, incidentally, are soy wax as well. Soy wax and sawdust. It's actually a product that my son makes, and we're about to have those up on Amazon. They fit right inside the R of a Rocket King. Alright, that's good enough. I'll have to remelt this a couple times throughout the process, so I don't need to get 100% melt on this first go. Of course, you don't have to use a rocket stove for this. Once you get that initial melt done, a candle on some bricks can keep that stuff melted. So that's also an option. I just like any excuse to make a fire in my rocket stove. Pull this off the fire and take it over to the log. Got a cheap chip brush here that I've actually used for wax before. Dip the brush in the wax, and then I'm going to use a corner to gently tap on each dowel to cover it up. The goal here is just to seal the top of the dowel. Once all the dowels are sealed on each log, I'm going to wax the ends and any wounds on the log. I'm just looking for a decent size thickness. Usually 2 coats gets the job done. To seal each end, I usually stand it up. It helps to get the end as flat as possible so your wax doesn't run off. As I seal the second end, I'm using caution to make sure I don't knock the wax off the first. This area where I cut the branch off here and that scar, I'm going to go ahead and seal this as well. Again, any potential entry point for other spores to get in this log. Even a little saw graze like that, I'm still gonna seal. Alright, and this log is finished. Now I've just got 11 more to go. Alright, now this row is within 4 inches of this row, so I know this log is now finished. Alright, ready for the wax. The wax is starting to harden a little bit, but it's still soft enough to work with, and it's cool enough that I can smooth it with my finger. When the wax starts to cool and gets to this consistency, it actually makes it easier to paint the ends of the log while it's still sideways. It's also cool enough to use your finger to cover the dowels. Use your judgment on this. The heat doesn't bother me. It's not that hot, but it may be hot for you. You could always use a rubber glove in this situation, but it does go a lot faster than the paintbrush, and I think you get better coverage. And this log is done. I'm just gonna stage my logs here on this chair until I put them back in the rick. For reference purposes, that log took 34 dowels, and the bag that I got has 1,000, so I think I'm gonna need to cut down some more limbs. Another point of note here is that it's important to use the dowels as soon as you can after they've been opened, just because they can get contaminated, and if they're left too long, the spore can die. And then I'll drill and then you dowel, okay? Many hands make light the work. Alright, one more quick tip here. When my row of holes gets close to a scar, like in this case where I cut this branch off, and then these two small branches, where I'm gonna have to wax anyway, I move the hole over to the scar. No sense having an additional hole in this log. Here we all the way around. I think we've got enough coverage on this log. Let's grab another log. That one will be more fun too. And that one. Those two need to go. Nice. Okay. Thanks for your help, son. Back to your homework. Love you. I've got a few more logs to wax here. I've got a few more logs to dowel, but I wanted to show you what to do once you're complete with that process. In other words, how the logs go back into the rick and how they're covered, because then you have to wait like 9 to 12 months before these logs are colonized and ready to force. So there will be a wait on video number 2. Okay, assuming of course here that all of my logs are doweled and waxed, which they're not, I'm gonna put them back into a rick. And then optionally, you can cover this with a shade cloth or canvas. And for that, I'm gonna use some silt fence. You don't wanna use plastic here. That's gonna promote mold growth. But silt fence is gonna block the sun, but it's also gonna let the rain through, which the moisture is important to help with the colonization process. In fact, if you live in an arid climate, you're gonna need to water your logs 1 to 2 times a week. Here in Georgia, with a rainy summer, I should be okay watering only when I haven't had rain in 4 to 5 days. To set up my silt fence shade cloth, I'm going to start with 2 2x2 oak posts, actually that the silt fence was initially stapled to, and lay them across the top of the rick. Then I'm going to follow with the silt fence and then 2 more posts to weigh it down. Eventually the silt fence will chill out a little bit and drape a little bit more nicely, but the goal here is to block the sun and allow airflow around the sides of the logs as well. You don't want your shade cloth touching the logs, which would promote mold growth. Alright, so I'm going to disassemble this, get the rest of those logs doweled and waxed, and then set this back up again. But I think you get the picture. Now I wait. It's going to take 9 to 12 months for these logs to be ready to force mushroom growth. Until then, I'm going to make sure they stay moist and not in the sun. A quick reminder to tell me how to say hello in your language, and I'll add it in my next video. Special thanks to my patrons for helping make these videos possible. And you may notice that Ross Lee's name was earlier in the video for 15 seconds. He upgraded his sponsorship to the highest level. Ross, thanks for your support, as well as all of you who support me over on Patreon, helping make these videos possible. As always, our mission here at Green Shorts is to help you see green so you can be green. And save little green by doing it yourself, and utilizing resources you have in your very own yard. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and share. Tell me how to say hello, and we'll see you in the next video next Friday, or maybe Saturday. We'll see. Thanks for watching.